Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome Boston-based entrepreneur, author, speaker, and cancer survivor, and an incredible inspiration, Joanna Chanis. So welcome, Joanna.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much, Karen. Good afternoon, I think. Yeah.
So firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. So can you share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
My entrepreneurial journey started out of necessity so I could be home with my children more and
Yes.
have the flexibility to manage my own schedule. So the way it started is I was in a corporate sales and sales management career, and I really loved it. I loved everything about it,
Mm.
and everything. But there was travel involved. This is back in the 90s
Yes.
and in the 2000s, I should say, in the early 2000s. And I just made a personal decision that I would put my children's needs first and take a back seat for a while. And I was very privileged to be able to do that because my ex-husband was able to support us for a while in that sense. And I looked for a business model and a business that I could have some flexibility in the summertime when my children were off at school, and as well as Christmas or the holidays. And that's how I became an entrepreneur. I bought and owned and operated and then eventually sold a very large, high volume, as successful restaurant that ran on a collegiate schedule. So I was able to have the lulls during that time. But every entrepreneur knows, and I learned as well, that although you can manage your time, you are always working.
Yes.
Um, yeah, so, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are a mother and an entrepreneur. Obviously, you've owned and operated a successfully high volume restaurant, as you explained earlier, and founded a technology startup. So can you share with us more about this? And these are both vastly different industries. So what was that transition like for you?
Well, the transition was very easy because I had learned so much at running and operating my restaurant. I had learned all the basics that you need regardless of whatever industry you're in.
Mm.
I had learned that like trial by fire, being thrown into it.
Yeah.
And when I sold the business, I was taking a soul cycle class, and it was literally, I think we sold the business in October 1st or something, and I was taking a soul cycle class like October 2nd. It was almost instant. And I thought to myself, what could I do that I really love and help people at the same time?
Yes.
And that's when I had the idea to develop a software and develop an app that would enable nail technicians to work on their own and have the flexibility to not be in the salon, but it would pair them up with clients that wanted an in-home service, and I would just provide the software.
Yes.
And it was and it worked. It launched, it worked, and I reached the point of proof of concept. I had customers, I had nail technicians that loved it, and then I didn't continue it for multiple reasons. But one, I had to build out the technology in order to be able to scale it, which was an undertaking that I trusted a company with, and it ended up being fraudulent. And at the time when I was unraveling from that, COVID kicked in. So the business would no longer be viable anyway because people weren't allowed to go into people's homes.
Yes.
But it was a really incredible experience. I met such amazing people. I ended up actually going back to nail school and learning how to do manicures and pedicures myself. So when I was designing the software with the engineers, that I could really have something that would be of tremendous value
Yes.
to the people that were using it. I really wanted to give people the opportunity to do what I had done. If they wanted to stay home with their kids, um, if they wanted to stay home with their kids but still wanted or needed to work, this gave them the flexibility, and it was a really fun and very educational experience.
Amazing. So
Thank you.
within that, what would you say some of your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career? And you may have had multiple, but what really stands out for you?
Follow your gut. I knew when I had hired the technology company that was going to build out the second iteration of the app. I had done a very inexpensive first build to do proof of concept. Like
Yeah.
every entrepreneur that I mentor or I help, I always tell them, get to market to do proof of concept with the least amount of money possible.
Yes.
And that way you have more money to invest in, the longer term. And I knew that something was off about the company that I had signed with. And what was interesting is it checked all of the boxes. So I think that that's like a very interesting parlay kind of into relationships as well. We all have, I think, these mental checklists of, oh, if the person has this, and this, then of course it's a great fit. So on paper, this technology company checked all the boxes. It was right
Yes.
on Boylston Street in Boston's Back Bay, which is a very prestigious street. It had a lot of, it was definitely a startup-ish feel, but it had that young, energetic energy. It had people showing up every single day, and the people that worked there didn't know that this was going on. It was just the head person. So entrepreneurs like myself, and there were dozens of us all across every market, signed up to have this company build and scale their product. And instead of using the money for development, the founder and CEO was using it for other reasons.
Mm.
And so I knew something was off, and I didn't listen to my gut. I should have, well, I don't really have any regrets, so I can't say that I shoulda, woulda, coulda. I always say what's the,
Yeah.
but I knew deep down that something just wasn't right.
Mm.
And that is the single most important thing, I think, in
Yes.
anything you do. Yeah, is to listen to yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being an entrepreneur and a mother is a lot of pressure and both highly demanding. So, can you share with us how you managed both and what were some of the tools you used to help yourself, especially when under pressure?
Okay, so I don't always do it well, so I'm just gonna put that disclaimer right
Yes.
out there, but I do my best. We're all imperfect, and I definitely have big strokes of imperfection there. However, I'm a really organized person, and I
Mm.
found that when my children were little, I mean, they're 19 and 17 now, one is an adult and one is almost an adult, but it's not like you stop parenting, so, but it just changes, the relationship
Yeah.
changes. But primarily, especially when they were younger, and I was an entrepreneur, so it's a very demanding job, but I had my children that were always my priority. I was able to, and I help people with this
Yes.
now. I was able to structure my day, my life, and my house so it would run as efficiently as possible. So that is really helpful for me. So, for example, I always organize what I'm going to serve for dinner. And you would think, oh, that's easy because you owned a restaurant, but I wouldn't feed them restaurant food every night. I
No.
would bring meals. So I would really organize myself. So an example of this, and I help people, and I've had people have tremendous success following this same method that I I didn't think it was a method at the time, but now it's a method that I teach people. But for example, if you just take out the grocery piece, I would always go to the grocery very, very early on Monday morning. And on Monday morning, I would block out 2 or 3 hours to prep all of my meals through Thursday for my family.
Yes.
And that means that nothing would go into the refrigerator. I still do this today because I'm still an entrepreneur, but nothing goes into the refrigerator unless it's washed, chopped, dried. And I learned this by having a restaurant, how ahead you can prepare at least the ingredients separately. I mean, the best way to think about this is when you go into a restaurant, they're not sitting there chopping the salad at the time.
No, they're not. Everything is pre-done.
Everything is, well, it's cleaned and it's washed and it's ready to go, and you
Yeah.
really put it together. So alleviating that kind of stress of what we're going to eat as a family of four was super helpful. I also had, the house structured in a way where beds would get changed on one day, where laundry was done on 2 different days. And I kept my house I ran it like a business. I think I still,
A tight ship.
yeah. And so I think that level of organization is really important. The other thing is I didn't say yes to things that I really didn't want to do.
Mm.
And I was very aware of how I spent my time because I knew I was just one person and I had the responsibility of 18 employees and then I had these 2 children. And so balancing the two, and I always put my children first.
Yes.
Yeah. I could have
Yeah,
made
of course.
money at that time, but
So I want to talk about leadership or the lack of leadership from both an entrepreneurial and global perspective. So what would you say makes your leadership style different? And can you give us some examples? And what do you believe needs to change from a leadership perspective to change the current narrative?
okay. I think what makes my leadership style unique and effective is the practicality and solution-based methodology that I use. I also do what I say. So I don't teach it in theory. I actually practice it on myself.
Yes.
So I biohack myself a little bit and I try things for a very long time before I know they work. And then I figure out how to teach them to other people so they can have the positive results that I have.
Yes.
So I definitely have that practicality, which I believe is my superpower. I can see things from a bird's eye view and then actually kind of get through it and declutter.
Yes.
And I know you've experienced that firsthand because I've helped you through different things that you were having a challenge with and kind of decluttering the problem, right?
Yes.
Right. So I'm a great declutterer and focused on the solution, and I can see it very clearly and I can implement it very effectively and efficiently. What I think, and I have on a leadership perspective, that's such a loaded question. I think
It's very broad.
very broad. And I think that, by human nature, I do believe that people really do the best that they can at the time that they're doing it.
Yes.
So I always look at everything from that perspective. Now, does that mean that I agree with every single thing that every leader does? Of course not. However, I think that I don't know enough about the decisions that they have to make to say how I would change anything because I don't know what their parameters are. I only know what we see in the media or what we hear about in other people's opinions, but I don't really know. But there are a lot of times where I look at a process, because that's what I do for my clients. If I look at a process and I can see where the holes are and I can see how we can fix them efficiently and probably with less money and less effort. And I think that that's not really unique to me. I think that's unique to a lot of women,
Mm.
where I think we're problem solvers by nature.
Yes,
And we've got to juggle a lot of things at the same time. So I'm always about the path of least resistance, but the most efficient way. And I really want to get to the root of the problem. And I
yes,
think that there are a lot of leadership decisions which are band-aid like and not really
yes.
getting to the root of the issue. So I think that if I could wave a magic wand and change one thing, like maybe like really get to the root of the issue and solve the problem and then move on so it doesn't keep rearing its ugly head generation after generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, through this whole journey, in 2019, you were diagnosed with breast cancer, which changed everything for you. Can you share with us more about this and how did this shift and change your career path? And was there a particular moment that gave you clarity, which led to what your purpose and passion is today?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Breast cancer changed everything for me. It was the beginning of a true metamorphosis and evolution. I am a completely different version of myself, and I believe that that is true for people that get a cancer diagnosis. There's life before and then there's life after, and
Yes,
I really became aware of, not intentionally at the time, but I've written and published a book about my experience between diagnosis um, and my life saving surgery. However, I believe that I knew that I had to really pay attention to what cancer was trying to teach me,
yes,
because I was really everything from the outside looking in, um, looked great, and it wasn't.
yeah,
And cancer really made me pay attention and put myself first, which I had never done up until that point in my
yes,
entire 47 years. And it taught me so much, and it continues to teach me, because it's not like it goes away and then you forget about it. It's
no,
something that is now part of your fiber.
yeah,
And the way it changed, it led me to my true purpose. My true purpose was what I was initially trying to do when I launched my app, but I didn't see this coming. I wrote and published a book, and as you know, I was invited to speak based on the principles and the teachings of the book at a large company of a mutual friend of ours that we both have,
yes,
Jen, who's amazing. And I gave a talk, and from there, I love corporate speaking, so that started, which is incredible. It's something I
mm,
really enjoy doing, and I think people get a lot of value out of it, which always feels good to be able to help others. And I then went. I was connected with one of the women, young women, that was listening to my talk. She asked our mutual friend Jen if she could um, meet me, and asked if I would mentor her. And I had mentored young people in the past, mostly up until that point, just entrepreneurs.
yes,
Um, as investors would hire me to mentor these young entrepreneurs to be able to get them to launch. So I had done that in the past, but I had never kind of taken somebody that works in a company, and I saw that there was a need. So I started to meet with her on a biweekly basis and really help her through the issues that she was having. And I asked her if she would put a group of her peers together, so I could know what they wanted to know and do research for my next book. That was what my intention was. And when
yes,
this group of people came together, it was so incredible. And it still remains to be one of the most fun and energetically amazing things that I do. And I was helping them, answering their questions and doing these talks and doing research and gathering data for my next book. And we were having such impactful, valuable, practical solutions to what they were going through. I thought there must be other people that need this. So
Yes.
let's take the show on the road. I asked them if they would be willing to film what we would talk about. And they all immediately unanimously said yes. I'm so lucky because they're all so successful and so incredibly amazing. And from there, I filmed with them, and that launched a professional mentoring business. And it's just been an incredible journey.
Amazing.
And a
Amazing.
and a podcast that's being released at the end of the week. So this is now, where are we? It's July 21st. So we're just waiting for Apple to give us the green light. And I also have a website where you can watch my YouTube snippets of it on YouTube. And yeah, so it's just been an incredible journey. And who knew that I would be a professional doing something I love, but doing it on a professional basis is just
Amazing.
yeah.
So you are leading and doing incredible work by mentoring teens and young women in their 20s and those who have lost a parent, specifically young entrepreneurs. So what would you say is the biggest challenge women and girls face? And what do you do in terms of mentorship? And can you give us any examples?
Yes. I think the biggest challenge that women face is to know their value and their worth.
Yeah.
I do. And I know that because I face the same challenge.
Yes.
And I work with all age groups. I work with women in their 30s. I work with women in just like you in your 40s. I work with women in their 50s. The show is filmed with women in their 20s, but who knows, that might change. But
Yes.
that's season one. Because I had lost a parent when I was a teenager, I'd lost my father. He passed away when I was 16. I always hold a special place in my heart for anybody that needs help, especially when they're applying to university or college. So I have, right now I'm working with a beautiful young woman who I have just seen, she lost her dad a year and a half ago, and she is really just such an incredible light. She helps out her mom at home with her 3 other siblings. She works a very demanding job. She keeps up her grades at school. So we're doing her college list, and that's just something I do, like, to help other people. I don't charge for that. This is just, that's my
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
So I have methodology that I've developed and tips and tricks that I put in a toolbox for these people that I help
Yes.
that helps them get to the place that they need to be and feel valued, feel empowered, feel enough. Everyone always says to me, what would you go back and say to yourself, your 20-year-old self? I'm gonna try to answer this without crying. I just close my eyes and I would say, Joe, you're enough. You're enough the way you are. And don't say it to each other. I say it to my daughters all the time. I say it to myself. I say it to my clients. And I teach them aside from saying it, because words are just words,
Yes.
but I have actionable tools that I give them that are theirs forever, where they can come into their own value, and they do. If you check out the website, I have so many testimonials. I know you gave me a beautiful testimonial as well, and so much proof that what we're doing is working. And I see it. One tangible example is there's a young woman in this group, which they call themselves the OG Squad, and this is like my book research group and everybody that's going to be on the podcast season 1. And she really took the tools that I taught her and implemented them, and she was able to really have, within 6 months, I would say, a complete transformation. And she was able to buy a house, switch, uh, really kind of switch it up, and really come into herself and do things that she wanted to do. Talking to her and having the confidence was huge. So I think confidence is attached to your value, like how you
Yes.
see yourself. And those things all came together for her very, very quickly. She's doing so well.
Mm.
And that's just a real tangible example of when you see yourself in the best possible light, your confidence will grow and you'll be able to do the things that you really enjoy and have a happier life.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me into the next question, or to just to elaborate on the last point was, so many women and young girls have great ideas. The biggest challenges are accessing funding or support. What and how do you believe you do differently to support women and young girls? And where do you see the biggest gaps that need to be filled to build self-confidence? And how do you help them to grow?
So I don't know if I do it differently. I don't believe that the biggest challenge is funding. I don't believe that. I think there's plenty of money out there. You just have to know where to look for
Yeah,
it. I believe that the biggest challenge is getting started. I think
yes.
a lot of women and not women, I think people they're paralyzed by perfectionism.
100%. And there's
And
no such thing.
right, there's no such thing, that's what makes me different. I teach them just to start where they are, to go for it. And that's how I've been able to launch 3 businesses
Mm.
and have success. If you think by any means that it was all perfect when I opened it absolutely was not perfect. I think one of the funniest stories I have is when I was doing a proof of concept for my nail app called Mobile Manny. I didn't have the sophistication and the software to, because I couldn't afford it, to pair up the nail technicians with the exact appointment of the request from the client. So what I was doing is I would sit on 2 computers and manually do it myself, but to the client and to the technician, it appeared as if it was magically being done, but it wasn't magically being done. I was literally in my living room sitting, and I would man it for hours and hours, and I'd make sure that I could give them that experience. And if I
Yeah.
had waited for that bill to be done or that, I would have never launched. And
Uh,
so I always say just start where you are, and it's always evolving. And I
mm,
think what I do differently is I think people will always say, I don't have the money to do that. I
mm,
think that that's just an excuse. I think if you build something really great, the money will always come.
yes.
And you just have to do your best, and you'll be surprised at how you can start with very, very little money. You have to be scrappy and you have to be resourceful. One of my favorite entrepreneurs of all time, Sarah Blakely from Spanx,
Mm,
started with $5,000. Okay.
yeah, and turned it into $1 billion business.
Right. So I think people think, what when you see, oh, I've done rounds of funding, I've done rounds of raising money, I've done rounds of raising all that stuff. Yeah, that comes later. Why don't you start where you are with what you have?
Mm,
Okay. And this is what I teach people to do. One business that I was advising on to launch, I remember she had investment, she had the money, and she wanted to buy all this equipment before she had proof of concept. And I said, rule number 1, pretend you don't have the money.
yeah.
Figure out how to do it without spending $35,000 on something you don't even know if you need yet.
Mm,
And she did. And the business ended up pivoting where she never would have even needed that equipment. And it ended up changing. So I am always like a pay as you go kind of girl.
mm,
And you know, I've done fundraising for my technology business. I get it. I understand how to do both. And I understand how it's necessary and where it's necessary. But you don't need, in a lot of cases, to have a ton of money to start. You just need to have the attitude.
Mm.
You need to be able to want to do it no matter what. And you need to just go for it. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads me to the next question. You are an American Greek born in Worcester, Massachusetts, and had moved 30 years ago to Boston for college and have lived in Boston ever since. So, can you share with us more about this? And do you believe this helped you to get to where you are today? And I mean that from a college perspective and, studying and all of that, because some people feel like you spend all this money going and getting an education, but it doesn't necessarily always translate in the real world. So I just kind of wanted your perspective on that.
Well, I think it's case by case. I think for me, it was very important to leave the town that I grew up in, which I love, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity. I had never lived in a major city before, and I don't know that Boston really is a major city, but to me it was and still
Yeah, I
is.
mean, it was bigger than where you were, right?
Right. And so I definitely saw a whole new world. It was almost like a Princess Jasmine moment in the whole new world. Wow, what's this? And and although I grew up traveling to Greece and I traveled a little bit in Europe by that time, I just always knew that my life would be different than that. I
Yes.
always never, right. I always knew that it would be different. In regards to education, I think it's always valuable if you can afford it. However, it really depends on what you're studying. I think practical work advice is super important. I think that that's something that now generationally, I can take it now into my daughter's generation and education because I have one that's heading off to university next year and one the following year. And I did say to the one that's very entrepreneurial or seems to be right now, I said, would you like the money to start something instead of going to college? I did put that on the table.
Yes.
And she's going to follow academia, which is great. But I think it's, the education is a business like everything else. If you're getting a professional degree and you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, of course you need to go through
Yeah, of
all of it.
course. That's common sense. Yeah.
But everything that I'm learning and everything that I use right now, I learned in the street. Okay.
Yes.
Like hands on, working. And those are to me the things that come up. I mean, it's great because you can learn to write a proper email, how to communicate, like how to work with other people. So there's a lot of benefits to both. I don't know that I would go into debt for it,
No.
but that's a very personal decision. I also think it's okay to know that you can go back at a different time. I think that that's such a case and such a personal decision. It's like saying, should I get married or should I not get married?
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
it really depends on how you feel. It was interesting. I was being interviewed by a podcaster in LA. She's 20 years old. Great podcast, Shit Show of My 20s. She's fantastic, Sophia. And she's 20 years old and started this business. This was her passion. She's a loan officer, a mortgage loan officer by day. And I said to her, oh, it's so kind of refreshing that you're not in college. Like, what made you decide that? And she said, well, I knew that I would be going for somebody else and not myself. So
yes.
I made the decision to choose me. And I knew in that moment, regardless of what we were talking about, just because she was so sure of her decision and sure of what she needed as a person, I said to her, I don't worry about you. You are going to be okay no matter what you do because you see yourself. And I think that that's really important. I think that's more important than anywhere you go to college or any degree you get. I think it's really important to know yourself and to put yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having gone through this life-altering experience of breast cancer, has this helped you in some way to enjoy life more? And what are some of the personal changes you've made?
Okay, so cancer gave me the courage to put myself first, and it also gave me the courage to leave a 23-year or 22-year marriage.
Mm.
I I knew for a very long time that my marriage wasn't working, and I was trying to fit a square peg in a round hole for, I would say, better off 15 years.
Mm.
And I knew after I had been diagnosed, it was time to move on.
Yes.
And really, that was a very big decision. I mean, it was a very, very hard decision, very, very big decision. And I'm very unsure if I would have made it if I didn't have my experience with breast cancer. But breast cancer really showed me that I had to put myself first, and I could see things very clearly. It was definitely a wake-up call.
Yes.
I changed a lot of things about myself after.
Yes.
I stopped over-explaining. I think
Yes.
that I stopped over-explaining. I did what I wanted to do, even if that meant doing nothing. I'm probably, like you can tell, a high energy person. I go, go, go all the time. People are used to me that way. They're used to me showing up. I'm usually the organizer of things. I'm the first one. And I took time, and I'm still taking time for myself. And I decompress because, you asked me if I had any other traumas. Well, I had grown up with a very sick parent, a very difficult childhood, and my father died when I was 16. I grew up extremely poor, and my mom was a single mom and, an immigrant, and did the best she could with what she had.
Yes.
But it was a tough upbringing. And I now, from September of 2019, when I got diagnosed with breast cancer and healed from cancer, we went into a global pandemic not long after that. And then not long after that, I decided to make the life-changing decision of leaving my marriage. And so that's three kind of traumas all condensed into a short amount of time that not only I'm going through, but that my children and my ex-husband are processing in their own version, because those three things happen to every single person in my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like putting the oxygen mask on myself and then helping my children through this as much as I possibly can. I think that it makes me have a very unique perspective in helping anyone through any sort of challenge.
Yes.
And that's what makes me successful as a mentor and allows my clients to have the tremendous success that they have, because it's not a long drawn out process.
No.
As you know firsthand from your experience, I think we worked for 3 hours together total.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
At least 3 hours.
Yeah, I think it's that.
And it's almost been like a 3-year process to try and, heal the trauma. But yeah.
Right. So do I have PTSD? I definitely have PTSD. I mean, even coming to my home in Newport, Rhode Island, where we had quarantined, and being here for summer now, I wake up sometimes and I'm like, oh, is that what's going on? And
Yeah.
even seeing my children, suffer through all of these things, it's very traumatic.
Yes.
But as you know, I have a method in handling the trauma, and that has not only saved my life, but changed my life for the better.
Yes.
I'm able to be better each day, and I measure progress instead of the perfection. And I really am in a great groove, and I think that that's what gives me the energy to be able to bring others along in this, because everybody goes through hard stuff. I mean, I'm not unique.
No.
I think everybody has their story, and to them that's always the worst thing because it's happening to them.
Yeah.
And I
And
think
also people only understand things from the perspective of their own point of view or their own experience, not necessarily what else is going around. So
Yeah, what I'm really good at is putting myself in the other person's shoes if I
Mm,
haven't had that exact experience, because I have had a lot of experiences,
mm,
unfortunately, on the traumas. I
mm,
can, I can speak to them firsthand and firsthand,
mm,
but to the ones that I can't, I make sure that I can put myself in that person's shoes.
mm. So the next question is, you're also a speaker, which you obviously mentioned earlier, which is amazing. So was this a natural transition for you, or was this a challenge?
I really love helping a lot of people at once, which is great. So I really I feel the energy of the group, and I love that. It was a very natural transition. I feel very, very comfortable doing it, and I was just answering an article where I was interviewed for a magazine last week where I had to think about how that love and passion for that started, but it goes back to a childhood memory that I have. I was 15 years old. My first job that I started when I was 13, in order to help my family out financially, is I worked at our church office, which was a very, very big parish and a very, 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 it was very businesslike. And I had my very first boss. Her name was Teresa Sampson, and she was no joke, and she really molded me. A lot of the things that I still do, I learned from her in those, first 3 years of my career, if you
Mm,
want to call it that. But we had a dignitary of somebody coming to visit our parish, and we're talking about a parish of over, 1,000 families at the time. It was very big.
mm,
And so there were always a couple of hundred people in church every Sunday. And she said, well, you're going to give this speech. You're going to write it, I'm going to edit it, and you are going to get up in front of everybody and you're going to give the speech.
mm.
And I was like, I'm going to drop dead right now. And she made me write it, and who knew that I would end up becoming a writer. Um, and she edited it, and she made me get up all week in the empty church, and she made me practice over and over again, painstaking. I'm sure now it would be considered some form of child abuse, but back then it was totally okay. But I mean, I love her and she loved me. So,
Yeah.
but I get up in front of a few hundred people, and I'm 15 years old, and I'm reading my own words. And it's like I had an outer body experience. I had never
Mm,
felt like I felt that incredible high. And at the end, you weren't allowed to do it then. I don't know if you're allowed to now. I'm Greek Orthodox,
mm.
and so we're kind of strict about a lot of stuff, and I don't keep track of the rules, but whatever. I modify when needed.
Yes.
Sorry. But people got up and I got a standing ovation. And I remember thinking, wow, this feels like really good. And I have had the opportunity, so I just never had a fear of speaking in crowds after that, because the first time it just went really well. And I don't know, of course it doesn't go well, for everybody all the time, but I felt this exhilaration, which I still feel. Like I have a little ritual that I do before my talks, and I really, a lot of people get like pumped up, and I meditate, and I just then open my eyes and I do it. And I don't know, it's well received. I mean, you tell me. So
No, absolutely. No, 100%. Amazing. So that leads me to the last question, which is, what are the three key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because some people don't like the word legacy. So how would you like to be remembered?
so the three pieces that I would tell every entrepreneur is to believe in yourself more than you believe in anything else, and
Yeah.
believe in your idea.
Mm,
You have to love it that much.
mm,
You have to love it that much. Two, start where you are. Just start.
mm,
Do something every day to move your dream forward.
mm,
And number three, people will doubt you. People will tell you, they will impose their own fears on you. They will tell you how hard it's going to be.
mm.
They will tell you, they'll do it well intended, not well intended, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You have to have your go to armor in your head to keep all of that riffraff out. Because if someone can deter you that easily, that's not your dream, right? And I would love to be remembered as being kind.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Joanna, for your time. So, if people would like to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
The best platform and how you reach me, because I answer it myself, is joannachanis.com. That's JoannaChanis.com. You can follow me on Instagram as well and direct message me. But if you if you connect with me on my website, I will get your email myself, and I would love to hear directly from people. And if anyone, I'm taking on for the very first time, I just announced it yesterday on my Instagram. I'm taking on for the very first time one-on-one clients that are not entrepreneurs. I obviously work with entrepreneurs all the time, but I'm taking just personal clients. To anyone who needs help moving the needle, getting through anything that might be a little sticky or hard, or they just want to feel better, or they wake up and they're like, why am I in, what's going on? What is this all for? Reach out to me. I love to work with you and help you move through it, just like I helped you, Karen.
Thank you so much, Joanna, and hopefully we can have you back in the future to see where you are in your journey.
I would love that. Thank you so much.